Okay, so I'll let everybody in. Then you can start.
Okay, great. So hi, I'm Heather McCain. I'm from Live Educate Trans.
Just 2 minutes, let them join.
Okay,
Yeah, now you can start. Now you can start.
good. Okay. Hi, I am Heather McCain from Live Educate Transform Society. And our organization is entirely staffed by disabled and neurodivergent folks. The majority of us are also 2S LGBTQIA+. I am a white non-binary person. I have a shaved head, blue glasses, and freckles. And I do this visual description to ensure that blind and partially sighted participants have access to visual information, just as I'll be describing any of the images that are on these slides. And the theme of the presentation is kind of a notebook. So it's got sketches of notebooks and pens and lined paper. And that's what each of the slides look like. And this slide also has our logo, which is a light bulb made of speech bubbles. Some of our members think it looks like a hot air balloon, and we are okay with that as well. And it has our contact information, which is connectwithlets.org. And Connect with Let's is also how you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you for joining me today for ADHD tips, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So we are told that we have consent over our bodies, but then we are taught in small and large ways that we have to control our body, minds, and senses and only meet our needs when given permission or at specific times. In this workshop, you have autonomy over yourself. I trust that you will do what you need. Your participation and your needs may be different to that of others, and that is okay. So this may look like getting up and stretching around, or watching this from bed, cuddling with a pet, doodling as you're listening to me. So I value your participation, whatever it looks like. So thanks for being in this space with us today. This slide has an image of a person's hands cupping a rainbow paper heart. I'm joining you today from the stolen land of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And this locality is a tiny piece in the larger context of the ongoing work that must be done in order to challenge the legacies of colonialism and create palpable disruptive change. And this slide has a photograph of sunlight filtering through trees at Seymour Provincial Park. Disability awareness, including neurodivergent people, must be part of moving away from our colonial practices. We need to question what privileges we have because of colonialism and what we can do beyond the land acknowledgement. And this slide has a photograph of an unpainted totem pole against a blue sky with border of wavy lines. It's important to keep in mind that people who are neurodivergent are often not diagnosed until later in life, or who may not have a diagnosis at all and self-identify, which is valid. And not the statistics are not a true representation of how many people are neurodivergent. And I just want to share a couple ways in which our healthcare system creates barriers to care. So Indigenous people do not have access to equitable health services due to a variety of factors, including geography, intersecting biases like colonialism, lack of compassionate and or respectful care, and culturally unsafe care. Black people are less likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and when they're diagnosed, they're less likely to receive accommodations and or treatment. They're also more likely to be treated in schools as if they are acting out on purpose, and more likely to get attentions and suspensions. Autism research is male-centric, leaving many women and gender non-conforming people undiagnosed, as their characteristics may be different. This has led to autistic communities using terms like autism is not a boys' club to get across the need to focus on all genders. Statistics have shown that medical professionals give women less time and attention than men, and this affects one's ability to get a diagnosis. And testing and therapies are cost prohibitive, meaning that people who live in poverty may get diagnosed later in life or not at all. and when diagnosed, they may not be able to receive the accommodations or therapies that they need. Creating more accessible spaces for all is important because of the social factors that leave many behind and undiagnosed. So please consider how requiring a diagnosis may prevent people who need access from receiving it. And this slide has an image of a person who's got a mask on and they're holding a cardboard sign that says what I just did. So there are expectations and pressures on neurodivergent people to mask, particularly in workplaces, which has long-term negative effects on mental health and self-esteem. One way that neurodivergent people are expected and often trained is to simply deal with things through masking, instead of addressing the systemic and interpersonal issues that affect neurodivergent people. We're forced to mask to such a degree that many of us don't even realize that we're doing it. Masking is exhausting. It often leads to chronic burnout, anxiety, reduced self-esteem, and the feeling of being an imposter. Myself and many of our members, including my dad, who's 78, are only now being diagnosed after a lifetime of masking. This survival tactic is deeply entrenched beginning in childhood, often unconsciously due to societal expectations, stigma, and/or experiences with rejection. It became a necessary coping skill. Late diagnosed people have to contend with unlearning masking. What makes this so difficult is understanding what our authentic personality is and what is masking. For many of us, masking is so habitual that it feels natural. A diagnosis can bring relief and validation, but also grief as we think about our past experiences, how we could have been better supported, what we could have done differently if we had known earlier, and figuring out ways we have been suppressed or modified who we are. So as I mentioned, my father, who's a professional Santa, and he's shown in this photograph with me. He's got a hiking pole. We're in a forest. I have a double sling on, and he's been helping out with our organization's low sensory spaces. And he's great in there because as Santa, he immediately puts people at ease. And now at 78, he has finally acknowledged that my ADHD did not come from nowhere and that he also has ADHD. It's great to watch him understand more of himself. And my parents, who will be married this August for 52 years, have discovered healthier ways to communicate with each other by learning about his neurodivergence. But while this information has been incredibly important for him in understanding himself, there's a lot of grief. Grief for who he could have been had people better understood him, had he better understood himself. And sometimes when I show him TikToks about ADHD, I can hear him whispering to himself, "See, I was trying my hardest." He is telling his young self to ignore all those teachers who repeatedly wrote that he wasn't trying hard enough or applying himself. It hurts my heart so much to see the pain those words still cause him. Not only do we need communities and environments that help heal those wounds, but we need to work towards a day when those wounds aren't inflicted in the first place. Environments that affirm, support, and get the best out of who we are. So unlearning masking or unmasking is an ongoing practice that requires self-reflection, time, and support. We begin to understand how our society has centered one neurotype and how these biases have shaped our behaviors, habits, and sense of self. We must actively recognize, confront, and dismantle the internalized ableism that has shamed and stigmatized us. We need to let go of our own taught, harsh self-judgments and develop a better understanding of how our neurodivergence shaped our lived and living experience. The process of accepting our full, authentic, neurodivergent selves requires time, patience, self-compassion, supportive community, kindness, encouragement, and support. It is truly beautiful when a neurodivergent person is able to joyously celebrate who they are. Not only is this vital for the individual and their life, but it is a transformative act that is an example for others to see the possibility of their own journey of courage, growth, self-acceptance, and pride. So the beginning of the transformative act is learning about ourselves, our habits, our thinking, and how ADHD has impacted us, both for the positive and negative. So I thought I'd start with a couple frustrations of ADHD, and please, if you have any questions, let us know. So one frustration of ADHD is knowing what to do, but not having the initiative to start. And I feel this one really strongly. People with ADHD are often fully aware of what needs to be done, yet feel completely unable to start. Even when they utilize suggestions like having a clear to-do list or step-by-step plan, there is a disconnect between intention, ability, and action. There's often an invisible wall between that. And I just want to note that this doesn't indicate a lack of caring or ability, intelligence, or interest. This comes down to our brains struggling to translate ideas into movement. Other people may look at us and think we aren't doing anything or trying, but inside our minds, we are often pressuring and chastising ourselves, knowing we should be doing it, but we're just not mentally getting there. So this slide has an image of a bunch of medications. I take medications every morning and every night, or I'm supposed to. And this has been a habit for 20 plus years. It's vital to my ability to go about my day, my pain levels, my mental health, and my productivity. And yet I commonly forget to take my pills despite doing things like placing them where I know I will see them, having alarms go off to remind me to take them. Likewise, I know I need to brush my teeth and shower, but I'm often unable to actually do the action without a lot of effort on my part to try to get my brain to care to do. And this is an example of ADHD. The reason for this is that routine chores demand planning and sustained attention, areas where people with ADHD often struggle. And people who have ADHD often have lower baseline dopamine, which means that motivation is harder to muster for anything that feels dull or unrewarding. These tasks don't spark the brain's reward system, requiring excessive time and effort to get started, even when they're clearly needed. However, tasks that are novel, urgent, or intrinsically interesting are far easier to complete because they provide a more immediate dopamine boost. So dopamine is the primary chemical for motivation. Low levels lead to a person being unable to initiate action for tasks, even when they want to do them. A significant dopamine deficit can result in feelings of lethargy, fatigue, making it very difficult to do daily tasks. Dopamine affects a person's capacity to focus, especially when the person is uninterested and or the task requires sustained effort. Showering is another example of a regular task that some people with ADHD really struggle with, and this can often be connected to sensory issues. And this slide has an image of a person's head and they are in a shower. So I thought I'd pause here and see, can anyone guess how many sensory systems we have? And if you'd like to put a guess into the chat, then that'd be great. No guesses, that's fine. So the slide has 2 question marks, and the answer is 8. So I'll go over these, and there's a great article called sensory processing and our 8 senses explained. And it says we have visual input, which is our sight. We see through our eyes. They take in rays of light that create tiny pictures in the back of our eyeball. Our brain interprets the signals that it receives from the eyeball and tells us what we're looking at. We have gustatory input, which is taste. So our taste cells react to foods and beverages. They tell us about flavors, texture, and temperature. They're clustered in the mouth, tongue, and throat, and receive 5 specific tastes: salty, sweet, bitter, sour, and umami, savory. The third one is tactile input or touch. Our tactile system helps us to better understand the important sensations of pressure, texture, hot and cold, and pain. This includes discriminating between light touch and firm touch, and textures from dry to wet to messy. Our tactile system is also associated with bonding and relationships. Hearing and input is auditory. So we receive auditory input through our ears to gauge whether they are important or just part of our everyday life, as well as where they come from, how close they are, and whether we've heard them before. So moving on to the next set of 4, we have the olfactory input, which is smell. The sensory receptors in our nose pick up information about the odors around us. They pass that information along to a channel of nerves in our brain, and the power of smell can be underestimated. It's strongly linked to memory and emotion, and therefore can trigger unexpected trauma responses. We have the vestibular input or balance. These receptors are in the inner ear, and stimulation occurs through any change in position, direction, or movement of the head. The vestibular input contributes to our sense of body position in space, posture and muscle tone, and the maintenance of a stable visual field. Then we have the 7th, which is proprioceptive input or movement. This system is in our muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joint receptors. It tells us where our body is in space and detects and controls force and pressure. It helps us to feel grounded and know where we are and what we are doing. And interoceptive input or internal, sometimes called the hidden sense. The interoceptive system gives us the ability to feel what is happening inside our body. It plays a role in influencing emotions and sense of well-being and detects any internal changes. So these include hunger and fullness, thirst, body temperature, heart, breathing rates, social touch, muscle tension, itch, nausea, sleepiness, and more. And the reason I'm sharing this is because people with ADHD may have one or more multiple sensory sensitivities or differences. For example, with a shower, there are a lot of steps that people without ADHD often don't think about, but to a person with ADHD, it can be overwhelming. There may be sensory dysregulation with any of the steps, including changing clothes, getting wet, water temperature, tipping your head back, varying pressure of water stream, and getting out of a warm shower into a cold bathroom, just to give a couple examples. Even when the person loves being in the water, the in-between stages of undressing and dressing can be overwhelming. ADHD has a lot of contradictions, and one is that while a lot of people with ADHD may struggle to shower, they do often find that when they are in the shower, it can be very regulating for their emotions. Another thing that people with ADHD experience is mental paralysis. So during executive dysfunction, even the simplest tasks can feel impossible. Even though the person has the thoughts and plans, they are unable to convert that into action. Outsiders may confuse this state with laziness or procrastination, but it isn't that. It is a real and painful inability to bridge intention with action. We watch as our responsibilities pile up, feeling powerless, And our cognitive barrier makes it feel like we can't break through that neurological barrier. And this slide has an image of a person whose head is on a desk and their hand is covering the top of their head. There are other types of paralysis as well. There is choice paralysis, which is when a person is faced with so many options that their brain is completely overwhelmed. So their mind overanalyzes, endlessly weighs options, trying not to make the wrong choice, which often ultimately leads to no choice being made at all. So, for example, think of a cereal aisle at the grocery store, and this slide has an illustration of the inside of a grocery store. Imagine staring at that entire aisle of cereal boxes and having to choose only one. And this is an example of where there's so many choices that you can endlessly get caught in. I'm going to try and have this one for nutrition. I'm going to have this one for taste. I'm going to have this one because I like the brand. I'm going to have this one because I can afford it. And trying to whittle that all down to one. There's also task paralysis, which is when someone is unable to start or finish a task because they find it boring and unrewarding. This isn't about willpower, but rather an involuntary block where motivation, fear of making mistakes, or perfectionist tendencies make it nearly impossible to act, even when the task is important. And when those responsibilities pile up, the person feels stuck and sometimes zones out or does other unrelated activities. So what's the difference between ADHD paralysis and executive dysfunction? Executive dysfunction refers to difficulties with skills like planning, scheduling, structuring tasks, organizing, managing time, and emotional regulation. ADHD paralysis and executive dysfunction may seem similar, and they do have some overlapping characteristics. However, with ADHD paralysis, it's often a response to mental or emotional overwhelm, making it hard to finish tasks because of overstimulation or overwhelm, and executive dysfunctioning is about the foundational skills needed to organize and move tasks towards completion. So we're going to move into a section that has some suggestions for people who have ADHD. Please keep in mind that what may work for you might not work for another person. And so it is very much trial and error with yourself, with others. So it's great to share this information, but also be aware that there is no one size fits all answer for what will help people who have ADHD. And this slide has a photograph of a notebook that's open with a bunch of crumpled paper and a light bulb that's lit in the middle. So something that can really help is limiting distractions. So for example, there's a lot of people who use noise canceling headphones, myself included, to help kind of make the noise a little less overwhelming. When people are working, they may find that they like to listen to music that doesn't have lyrics because it's the least distracting for many. For people who have ADHD, who take in a lot of information, if there are lyrics in a song, most likely we're hearing them. And so sometimes that can be a bit much when you're working. So it's downloading apps that block social media apps for a set time. So you can actually get apps that will block social media apps or other types of apps that you may spend a lot of time just kind of scrolling on during the workday or at certain times when you're working. And that allows you to really concentrate on what you're working on instead of kind of getting lost in other apps on your phone or computer. Keeping your workspace tidy is really important for a lot of people who have ADHD. Again, it's another contradiction because people who have ADHD often find it difficult to keep their workspace tidy, but they work best when it is tidy. And so if you are working with someone who has ADHD and you are able to kind of help keep their workspace tidy, then that's something that definitely will be appreciated. And it just helps to have as little around us to distract us. Another thing that can really help is writing down distracting thoughts as they come, and then forgetting about them until you've completed the task. Sometimes when we don't write something down, it just keeps circling around in our head, and it can become quite large. It can become enlarged in our mind as to the importance of it. And so sometimes it helps to know that we've written it down. We can put that to the side and we can come back to it at a later time. And this slide has an image of a person who has a ponytail at the top of their head on their computer. It's also helpful to break tasks into smaller steps. Completing a large, complex project can often feel overwhelming and intimidating. It is important to break them into small, manageable actions to reduce overwhelm, minimize stress, and build momentum. So an example is when I create workshops, I need somewhere to enter the work of creating a workshop. So I tend to start with the first step being creating a table of content. What are some things that I want to include in it? And then I pick one of those things and I go into that, and that often leads to other things, but it really helps me to break it into small, manageable actions first to reduce that overwhelm, minimize stress, and build on the momentum. It's also really great to give yourself a visual cue for each step that you successfully tackle. So kind of like getting a gold star in elementary school, or giving yourself a tick in the to-do list box. This helps to trigger a sense of reward and achievement that keeps our brain interested and motivated. I have a pedometer on my phone that I use to count my steps throughout the day. And I actually have two. I have one that is more accurate, but I have one that gives me fireworks when I meet my goal. And that's an example of a visual cue that kind of gives me a hit of dopamine and keeps me interested in trying to get to that achievement. And so anything that we can give ourselves, whether it's a gold star or a check in the to-do box, is a great way to kind of give us that little hit of dopamine. It can help to get organized. Getting organized can feel impossible because our minds are so hyperactive, and they come up with more ideas than we could ever realistically or energetically handle. So sometimes it helps to do a brain dump, essentially list out thoughts and worries. And how this process helps is that you can prioritize, organize, and visually map out what needs to be done. You can look at your list and remove anything that isn't urgent, sort the rest by importance. And this helps give a person a sense of control, improves organization, and gives your brain a sense of progress. This hopefully would lead to less overwhelm, boosted focus, and the ability to work on task and productivity. I use Trello, which is an app where I can make lists of to-dos and prioritize them in order by color with images, and it helps me free my mind a bit from having to contain all of those to-dos, and it helps me visualize what I have to do, what's most important, and what I can shuffle about. ADHD friendly scheduling. So a fully detailed schedule can become quite overwhelming. And so it helps to turn your day into a series of manageable work blocks. So by concentrating on just one task at a time, energy and attention are directed without splitting focus, which both increases productivity, reduces stress, and eases issues around time management. This is especially true when dealing with new or unpredictable demands, and transforms your work into a step-by-step process rather than a mountain of tasks. And this can allow for flexibility, which hopefully leads to reduced stress. I will note that this can be quite difficult for a lot of people. While it says by concentrating on just one task at a time, a lot of people with ADHD, myself included, have a really difficult time not having our mind kind of bounce back and forth between different activities or lots of open tabs. And so it helps to have these smaller chunks to kind of give us manageable blocks of focus and attention. It's important to focus on what matters most, and this can be helped with apps that have lists or calendar apps or visual planners to help prioritize that which you need to direct your attention to the most. And it can also help you figure out where you're going to be putting your energy on different days. And this can help the day feel more manageable and a lot less scattered. And this slide has a photograph of a person holding up a phone that has a calendar app. It's good to find out, are you a morning person or are you a night owl? And there's a large photograph of an owl on this slide. Observe when you're in the best state of mind and when you can get hyperfixated and really into work, and designate that time to complete what you can during that period and utilize your ADHD to your advantage. So I used to be a night owl when I was younger. Now I am very much a morning person who gets up at 5, and the morning is when I work the most and the best. And so that's when I try to use those peak productivity hours to my benefit, because if I try to work in the afternoon or the evening, I'm going to get a lot less done. So it's good to understand your own kind of internal clock and when you might be most productive. It's important to reward yourself. We are never too old for positive reinforcement, like that gold star in an elementary school, and there's a gold star on this slide. We want to be celebrated for who we are and what we do. Don't rely on others to do this for you. Reward yourself. This has the added benefit of boosting ADHD motivation. And it can be a snack, it can be a cuddle with your animal, your favorite song, a sticker, anything that gives you a sense of accomplishment or joy in getting a task done, particularly a boring task. So it's a great way to kind of promise your mind that you're going to get that dopamine hit once the task has been completed. Movement and mindfulness are also really important. So taking regular movement breaks, getting up and stretching, walking down the hall or just around the block, getting a different view or perspective. It's great to concentrate on your breathing in and out, do a short meditation. There are a lot of helpful apps like Insight Timer that help to manage stress and promote focus and motivation. People often feel that breaks are the opposite of productive, as they take you away from your task. However, taking a break can make a person much more focused, interested, and stimulated, and help to activate the brain. Research has demonstrated that exercise and movement can improve ADHD symptoms and attention by enhancing the blood flow to the brain and supporting stronger attention and self-regulation. So taking short breaks actually helps to recharge people with ADHD and make those work sessions more effective and mentally sustainable. And this slide has an image of a person who's taking a walk on the beach, and they've got headphones and a coffee cup. Body doubling, you may have heard of this. It's when you involve a supportive person, it could be family, friends, whomever, to check on your progress, offer encouragement, and track your progress. Body doubling, working side by side, whether done in person or online, can create structure, apply gentle pressure, reduce loneliness, and make the task less overwhelming, which can lead to a breakthrough of paralysis. So this might be being on a Zoom call with a friend, and you're doing your type of work and they're doing their type of work, or they're reading a book or doing something else, but you're both on the call and you have a set goal and you just kind of have that companionship that encourages you to stay on track and to do what you said you would. And so it's a nice, gentle way of having that encouragement, having somebody there. It can also be in person. So maybe somebody who comes over and chats with you as you clean your house, or who, looks after your kid as you're doing other things around the house. There are lots of ways that body doubling can be a really supportive practice. It's great to keep things very interesting and fun. The ADHD brain is creative and imaginative. It's one of the great positive things about our brains. So take advantage of that, of thinking of a few fun and exciting ways to turn monotonous tasks into something more likely that you'll enjoy. So that is a very broad kind of statement. So I have some examples of how you can do that. Oops. So gamify tasks. This is where you turn daily chores into games, racing themselves against timers, or trying to beat their own high scores, or treating their to-do list like a video game boss fight. Cleaning before the kettle boils, or decluttering with minimalization challenges, or using reward systems that convert tasks into dopamine-rich competitive experiences. So an example is racing against the clock. So set a timer for a short burst and challenge yourself to finish a task before it goes off. That countdown creates urgency, turning routine tasks into competition that are more likely to give our brains what it needs to be motivated. There is a acronym called INCUP, that's INCUP, and the basis of it is that we all have different motivators, and for people with ADHD we have 5 motivators, and the more of these motivators we can stack up at once, the more likely we are to do a task. So what INCUP stands for is interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. So the more of those that we can stack up, the more likely we are to do what we need to do. So racing against the clock is great because it's a challenge. It has urgency. So there's 2 of those motivators. If we are then going to reward ourselves with something like a donut is what comes to my mind, because that's usually what my reward is, then it also has passion. And so the more that we can use those motivators and stack them together, the more likely we are to accomplish our tasks. It's also great to compete with yourself, like keep track of your time and try to beat past records. This gives you those rewards of dopamine that can really help. And this slide has a image of a person who's holding a clock next to their face. We don't always need to compete with somebody else. It can be against ourselves. We can keep track of time. We can even put them up on a board. So again, we have a visual reminder of how we're getting faster or how we're improving our scores. And this is another way that not only do you get the dopamine hits when you're doing the task, but you also have a visual reminder to give you the dopamine hit of the memory of doing that task. So likewise, it's using visual reward systems. So listing tasks, assigning points for each section, giving yourself visual rewards like stars and stickers. And this really helps to break the tasks down, make it less overwhelming and more motivating for your brain to do what you need to do. You can also download apps that turn uninteresting tasks into exciting games or missions. So 3 that I'm aware of are Timo, which is TIIMO, Habitica, and Pomodoro. And this slide has a screenshot of the page off of Timo. And these help to add game elements like scores, avatars, streaks to make that progress visible and fun. You can also compete with someone else. So who can vacuum faster? Who can clear all the toys from the floor quicker? This helps to make the task more fun and add a bit of competition. This slide has an image of two people who are cooking in the kitchen. You can also pair a boring task with something that you enjoy, like folding laundry when you watch a episode of your favorite show, or listening to recordings of class while cuddling your animal. Another one that I often hear from people, and it certainly works for me as well, is like talking to your brain like it's a separate entity. Some people name their brain and have conversations with it. So we have a member who's named their brain Arthur, and so they're constantly talking to Arthur about what Arthur needs to do, and it just helps them kind of have a little more self-compassion and awareness and be a little kinder to themselves because they're treating their brain as another person. Some people have interviews with their brains and like ask them questions like, why are you not able to do this task? And it helps them kind of work through what some of the barriers are. This also helps them to be more engaged and interested, and the creativity of it drives them. I always have lots of voices in my head, and so I figure, why shouldn't my brain be another character? And it's just nice to kind of have that interaction, I find, especially since I work from home the majority of the time with my cat. And while I love her, the conversational skills are not quite where I'd like them to be. And so it's great to be able to talk with myself. Another one that I utilize, and that I've certainly heard from a lot of our members that they utilize as well, is inviting people over to your home just to force yourself to clean up. So my place is not as clean as I would like it to be, and I want it to be clean. I really, really do, but I just can't get to it. But if somebody says that they're coming over, that suddenly forces me to have that urgency and that pressure to actually get it done. And so that's something that a lot of people will do, is that they'll invite friends or guests over, knowing that that social pressure and that deadline will trigger that motivation for them to clean. And this slide has an image of a person who's cleaning a cutting board in a sink. Another suggestion is setting off multiple super loud alarms far apart from each other. So some people set several alarms in different rooms, including old-fashioned, like the twin bell alarms placed in the bathroom. And this chaos and noise force movement and the fear of disturbing others or neighbors, and it makes it impossible to ignore. This method is especially popular for getting out of bed in the morning. The inconvenience overrides any impulse to procrastinate. It can also be used for reminding yourself to take movement breaks or drink water. So having an alarm that's near your fridge so that you have to go to the fridge to turn it off while you're up, you might as well get water. I know for myself, I have a lot of alarms that go off on my phone because if I don't remind myself I need to switch tasks, it can be quite hard for me to do that. And I don't like clocks. I have anxiety. And if I have clocks, then I'm constantly looking at the time. And so anything that has a clock in my house has duct tape over it. But that means I don't know what time it is. And so I have alarms on my phone. The problem is my phone is right beside me, and it's super easy to press sleep or off on those alarms. And so I may set multiple alarms, but then I may also turn it off and then completely forget about why that alarm went off. Whereas if you place it somewhere that's further apart from you, the bathroom or the kitchen, you actually have to get up and go to it, and you're less likely to hit sleep or to just turn it off and forget about why you got up. One of our, a Reddit user suggested this one, which is that they program multiple Alexa devices to loudly ask, "What are you doing?" every hour. The surprise and sometimes irritation of the sudden synchronized query gets their attention and disrupts their hyper focus or distraction. We have other members who just have different alarms that go off like every hour or even every 15 minutes to remind them that they should be switching tasks. So there's lots of different ways that we can use this, and both AI and things like Alexa are allowing people to kind of create ways within their homes of having these different alarms or reminders go off. Another suggestion is wearing costumes or changing your physical environment to work. So some ADHDers report working while only dressed in costumes like ski goggles, hoodies, or boss battle video game attire. And this novelty kind of resets the brain's sense of routine, makes boring tasks more dramatic, and creates a sense of fun that sparks engagement. And this slide has a photograph of ski goggles on snow. Another suggestion that I heard from a member is that they're really into gaming. I'm not familiar with what game they were talking about, but they listen to the song that plays at the end of each level, which is when they have to battle somebody, and they play that while they're working. And because they play the game so often, that instantly sets their brain into thinking that it's whatever they're doing is more exciting than they actually are, because it's making them think of the game. So this is something that I've heard worked quite well. There's also the permission to be weird, like stand, pace, do odd routines. You know, who gets to set the standards of what is or isn't weird or odd? That's a whole conversation in itself. But embrace your quirks. Work standing up if that works for you, or pace, blast music. I definitely have to have my music like full blast. Every single week I get warnings on my iPhone that say you have exceeded the like the healthy amount of volume for the week. And I'm quite aware of that, but I need that loud music to help me hyper focus. It could be that you work in the dark. Unless I'm in a meeting, my lights are all off in my house. You know, a lot of people who are neurodivergent have sensory issues, as I described earlier. And so lighting can be a bit too much or overwhelming for them. It's often why it can be quite difficult to work in an office setting where there's those big fluorescent lightings that buzz, that are bright. And that alone can often keep a person, you know, unable to do their tasks. But accept that, you know, productivity comes from personalized, sometimes quote unquote weird routines that allow you that freedom from neurocentered standards, and really celebrate creativity. And just a note on language, I don't use neurotypical because typical is stigmatizing language. I use neurocentered instead. And the reason I use neurocentered is because it's not that there is a typical or a non-typical, it's that there is one neurotype that has been centered within society. And then the type that isn't is the neurodivergent. And so instead of working towards a day where, you know, neurodivergent people are seen as quote unquote typical, I really just want to work towards a day where all neurotypes are understood, accounted for, you know, have spaces that work for them. And so that's why I use neurocentered. This was another suggestion that I heard by a Taylor Swift fan. It was making a bracelet for each task and wearing it until it's done. So this is, they called it a task bracelet system. So you craft a bracelet for like every open task, wear it on your wrist, and as you complete each task, you drop the bracelet into a bowl. And this physical cue reminds you to finish things, and seeing that completed task bracelets like in that bowl offers you a satisfying dopamine boost at the end of the day. So this is, you know, the last slide talks about creativity. This is a great way to use creativity. You know, you get to create your own bracelets in whatever fashion you'd like. And that gives you a little bit of a break time or a little bit of movement time in between your tasks. And then you can wear it, assign it for different tasks, and wear it on your wrist until you've completed that task, and then drop that into the bowl. So this is another great example of how to use visual cues to help you in your work. Some people like setting digital clocks everywhere, like even in the shower, to this is to combat time, it's called time blindness. Some ADHDers install cheap digital clocks in every room, including the bathroom and the shower. This constant time awareness helps them to keep routines on track and prevent hyperfocus or losing hours to distraction. So as I shared, I'm the opposite. I have to, because of my anxiety levels, I have to have tape over all the clocks. But for other people, when you don't see the clock, that's what gives you anxiety. So that goes back to my original point about individualism. What works for one person with ADHD may not work for somebody else. So some people may want clocks everywhere in their house, and some people may not want any. It's good to kind of figure out where you are and what works for yourself. Another one that I've heard is not taking shoes off after you come home. If the shoes come off, the couch is doom, as someone said. Essentially, like, they keep their shoes on to maintain momentum for chores and avoid flopping into rest mode, because once they're sitting on that couch, they're a lot less likely to actually get up and go do chores. It's much harder to initiate movement again. And so, it's the same thing, like, don't get into your pajamas right away when you come home, because then you're less likely to do some chores. So these are just different ways to kind of visually tell your brain, hey, we're not in the relaxation mode yet. Counting down really helps for some people, like 3, 2, 1, and announcing the task, or saying, I'm getting up in 3, 2, 1 to wash dishes, helps externalize the action and build momentum. Some use dancer style countdowns like 5, 6, 7, 8, making the task initiation playful and prompting actual movement. So this works for some people and not so much for others, but it's a good kind of tip to try. I was sharing that, like, apps and AI have been helpful for people with ADHD in creating ways that they can have reminders. Smart lights are another way that some people have found reminders or telling them to change tasks. So this is intelligent lighting systems that change color at certain times of the day, and they're used as visual reminders for the tasks. Similar to having a conversation with your brain or naming it, some people like to narrate tasks, like your YouTube chef or a performer, that you fake a live stream while cooking or cleaning or doing tasks to generate novelty and engagement. So whether speaking aloud or internalizing a monologue, imagining a virtual audience turns mundane activities into playful challenges. And it's also a great way to just kind of turn something that's dull into something that's interesting. And if you have to do a task, you might as well enjoy it, right? We had this slide already. Using a single notebook for all lists is something that some people help. Instead of scattering like sticky notes all over the place, which often create mess in your workspace, having one master notebook for all lists, having a single source for tasks, and reminders that minimize forgetfulness and paper mess. My entire childhood, my dad had, his book, and in that book was his life. And that paper version was, it had everything that he needed and was really important for him. Personally, I tend to lose notebooks, and so it's always good for me to have an electronic version in case I lose them. But for some people, when they have a master notebook, it's really helpful because then they can just kind of go to that one book. And there's certainly a lot of things that you can get at like Staples, that you can get tabs and different, colored sheets to make it a lot easier to kind of differentiate sections of that notebook for all your needs. For some people, they have a lot of thoughts that are going through their mind, which keep them from doing the things they need to be doing. And so they craft a someday maybe list for tempting new projects. So if something pops up and there's no time for it, they can create this list and write it down to help it be less of a distraction, knowing that that idea is captured and can be revisited later. Oftentimes, if we don't capture it, we spend a lot more time giving it energy and attention and trying to remember it for when we'll have time for it, instead of just kind of letting it go off to the side while we deal with the task at hand, and then going back to it at some point if we want to. Starting on something unimportant to accidentally trigger work on the bigger thing. So one person reported beginning with a low priority task, only for their attention to wander onto the urgent, important projects. So this momentum transfer uses distraction productively. For myself, doing emails is kind of the low priority task that helps me jumpstart my day and then move into the larger, more urgent, important projects. For some people, they wear a morning shirt to distinguish work mode from sleep mode. So instead of fully changing for the day, some ADHDers put on a morning shirt specifically for starting the morning routine, as the gesture reduces overwhelm and cues the brain to activate. And this slide has an image of a person who's wearing a yellow shirt with palm trees, and he's pointing at himself. I personally, when I'm at home, I wear my clothes inside out because the seams bug me. But whenever I'm working at my computer, I have a specific shirt that I wear, and that's kind of like my work shirt, and it just helps me get into that mode. Similar to the bracelets suggestion earlier, one of the suggestions was using sweatbands made up from cut cloth. And so just sewing them sweatbands as a tactile signal that it's work or focus time now. Somebody said that instead of creating a sweatband, they used those what are they called? You know, the little smack bracelets that if you hit it against your wrist, then it immediately curls around it. And so they use that as like, it's work time now. And these are just unusual physical markers that really kind of support attention and routine and give your brain that little snap that it needs. Standing desks, walking pads, and pacing during work can be very helpful for people with ADHD. You know, movement is really important. And so if you have anything that keeps your ADHD brain staying engaged, then physical movement is kind of used as a form of body doubling with yourself. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for being with me. If anybody has any questions, please let me know in the chat. And also for those who are watching this being live streamed, if you have suggestions that you would like to make that I should be aware of, I'd love to hear them. If you have feedback about the suggestions that I presented today, I would love to hear from you. You can contact me at heather@connectwithlets.org. That's Heather connectwithlets, LETS.org. And I'll be doing presentations for each Tuesday of this month. I'm really looking forward to hopefully having you as an audience again. So thank you.
You can also put your email in the chat.
I will do that. Thanks. Also, I thought. All right. All right. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, we can end the call.
Question, are there these presentations for people who are primarily new to neurodivergence? So yes and no. There are some people who have been neurodivergent for a while who continue to learn from other people who are neurodivergent. So these presentations are always good to see if you have as much information as you possibly can when you are neurodivergent. But a lot of these suggestions are primarily for people who are either new to neurodivergence, newly diagnosed, or just beginning to kind of look into what type of neurodivergent they may be. Will any of these be for community building and talking to each other? So the next four, I can tell you what they are going to be. One moment. So next week is going to be imposter syndrome. And the third week is going to be gender and sexuality. And the fourth week will be about crit kindness. So we'll be talking about community within both imposter syndrome and crit kindness. And so for sure, those are important pieces. Definitely our fourth workshop, crit kindness, will have a big section on community building. Thanks for those questions. So will we speak to each other? I would hope so. That always depends on the audience. So same thing with this workshop. Like sometimes it's more of a back and forth with the audience, and sometimes it's more of a presentation as it was today. So that'll depend on who comes to the workshops and whether they're interested in speaking. But I hope so. You're welcome.
So if there are no more questions, we can end it today.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you for presenting.